Welcome to this Higher Mind Yoga podcast. This is podcast number 5. And this is Teddy here with you. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for listening. Thank you for following the self-transformation. So on this podcast, I'm going to put together some clips that I find interesting, hopefully for pertaining to the theme of higher mind yoga, which I'm still fleshing out, and using the word yoga in the name of my podcast was an interesting choice, because I actually wanted to explore more about what the idea or the true idea or the varied ideas of what that word yoga, yog, as it is said in India, in the East. And one of the things I did, I picked up the book Roots of Yoga. And I think I mentioned this on the last podcast. And this podcast, I'll be following up with some stuff there with the secret history of yoga, a featured program on BBC. I'll give some clips there, and I'll give you some links and check that out. But I picked up the book Roots of Yoga, and it features James Mallinson, who wrote the book, and also Mark Singleton. And I spoke about James Mallinson, and I mentioned Mark Singleton in the last podcast. And I picked up this book, Roots of Yoga, which they wrote, and it's pretty in depth. It's basically, to me, I'm not a scholar or anything, but it's like a textbook. And one of the things, just opening up to the first chapter, on the second paragraph, I found it interesting, and considering what I was just talking about, the higher mind yoga, and why I chose the name higher mind yoga. So, and here it's stated in the book, yoga is a particularly polyvalent Sanskrit word, which in ordinary usage may signify joining or attaching. That's traditionally what we know. I'm adding that. I mean, a means or method or way. It could also mean profit or wealth. A trick or deceit. An undertaking or business. Mixing, putting together or ordering, suitably, diligence, or magic. So depending how the word is used in Sanskrit, yoga can mean all those things, depending how in context. Just something else interesting about that word and the whole concept of yoga, and how it's metamorphosized, I guess, from being ancient before there was in India. And what we found out, a lot of the things that they were practicing were asana and meditation and breathing techniques, and how it now is coming to the future or the present. So the next clip I want to play is of a gentleman named Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. And this clip comes courtesy of something called a London Reel. And I have to give them credit. I'll put a link up there to all the stuff that I use in the podcast and comment on. So you can follow up and check it out for yourselves. So you can head on over to highermindyoga.com And I will post all the aforementioned links so we can keep abreast of what's going on. So this particular clip, I found it interesting, and I was doing a search, and one of the themes, of course, of Higher Mind Yoga is finding spirituality in plants, and specifically in this clip, the cannabis plant. There's a lot of different opinions on entheogens, or medicinal plants regarding different practices and different disciplines. But no matter where I look, somehow it's interwoven. And it seems the farther back in time you go, the deeper the roots go, so to speak. In modern times, it looks like somehow, the whole, drug hysteria, reefer madness, and all that kind of helped fuel this bias. And I don't promote anyone doing anything or taking any kind of substance against their will, but to deny that it's part of the history, it's kind of silly. So, without further ado, Rupert Sheldrake shares his moment of the first time smoking cannabis.
Sometimes they're purely recreational. I mean, a lot of people who smoke cannabis at parties are not doing it for a spiritual experience. But traditionally, it has been used in the spiritual context. And as I say in this book, the first time I actually took cannabis, I was in India. I was traveling through India from Cambridge on my way to Malaysia, where I spent a year studying rainforest plants. It was in 1968. An exciting time to be in India.
Why? Why was it exciting?
Well, it was the very height of the flower power. The Beatles had been to see the Maharishi. There were the war hadn't happened in Afghanistan and places. There were hippies traveling overland through Afghanistan to India. India was full of hippies and groups of people in VW buses and stuff. I mean, this was like a discovery by the counterculture of India. And it was when people were very starry-eyed, they would hear all the mysteries of the East and you could go to explore them and so on. I hadn't gone, I was stopped off on my way to Malaysia to do a Royal Society-funded project on rainforest ferns. So I was there.
You weren't on the flower power tip.
I wasn't on the flower power trip, and I hadn't driven across Afghanistan in a battered VW bus. And when I was in Delhi, I ran into the only person I knew in India, by chance, a graduate student friend from Cambridge who was doing an anthropological fieldwork project in a village in the Himalayas. And he said, "I'm going to my village, do you want to come?" So I said yes, and I delayed my flight and my arrival in Malaysia and went with him up to the village. It was several miles from the nearest roadhead, several hours walk actually, and no electricity. It was, there was simple old-style Indian life. He spoke the local language, he knew most people. We went for a walk one afternoon. We walked along a river, a mountain river. There was a cave beside it, and there was this figure in orange robes sitting there with a beard and long hair, the local holy man, Sadhu. And he beckoned to us, and he said to my friend, come. He knew him, and he spoke the language. My friend spoke the language. He invited us to sit down, then he brought out a chillum, and he said to me, "Have you smoked Shiva's holy plant before?" And I said, no, I didn't really know what he meant. And so he did an invocation to the god Shiva, and then showed me how to smoke it and passed me this clay chillum. And it was an incredibly strong cannabis. So I was suddenly blasted into this altered state of consciousness, which were in the midst of the Himalayas with a stream flowing down, the sadhu in orange robes. I'd only been in India 4 or 5 days. It was all utterly exotic. And I had this incredible experience of mind-opening, open to the sky, the earth, the mountains, part of nature, connected with everything. It was a real revelatory experience for me. And that was my first experience of cannabis. So the idea that cannabis could have a spiritual dimension right from the beginning of my experience with it has been a very important part of it. I didn't smoke it at a sort of drunken party or something like that for the first time. It was in a sacralized experience.
So there you have it. I don't know. I enjoyed that clip. I'll place a link on Higher Mind Yoga. You can check that out and check out the other interviews and check out London Real. I know there's some interesting stuff here. London Real. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. He's a biologist and an author of more than 85 scientific papers and 10 books, who have been ranked as one of the top 100 global thought leaders. He studied at both Harvard and Cambridge University and been a research fellow of the Royal Society here in London. Well, that's what I'm reading the bio here in London. He is well known for your theory of morphic resonance. I don't know if that is or his. Morphic resonance, which states that memory is inherent in nature and that telepathic interconnection exists between organisms. I can believe that. His new book, Way to Go Beyond and Why They Work, 7 Spiritual Practices in a Scientific Way, shows us going beyond is to move in a higher state of consciousness to a place of bliss, greater understanding, love, and deep connectedness. So check that out. It's also at sheldrake.org. You can hear more about that. I just thought that was just really interesting. His first adventure into cannabis, and it's so so wondrous and so spiritual in a more innocent time. There was no Afghanistan war, but there was a lot of other stuff going on. But anyway, nonetheless interesting. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. So what else I have here? I have a couple of other clips here. These are from a program that I found back, and it kind of fits in with the whole piece on the Hatha Yoga Project with James Mallinson. And through their findings, they found or discovered the strange evolution or different strands of what yoga means here and what yoga meant way back in ancient times, and how, I don't know, it's just a very strange story how it started as one thing and it changed to something else, became modern, became marketed, and how different aspects of it has completely changed. And it's, I guess there is a deep, I don't know if this is the right word, a deep fundamentalist view of it. And I don't mean that in any bad connotation. And then we take it all the way down to corporate yoga. And I'm just hoping that somewhere in between those two spectrums, because if you look at them, they're vast. When you really look at the history, the deep history of yoga, and how it's come to be here at the West, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it's an interesting thing to look at, to understand, to go, And I guess for myself, I go, well, I'll take a little bit from column A, and I'll take a little bit from column B. But nonetheless, here are these clips from BBC Sounds, The Secret History of Yoga, And I'll put a link and you can listen to the whole broadcast. Just bring it to your attention, and I guess just trying to bring forth a little knowledge, a little clarity for me, and hopefully for you. So let's take a listen.
Books on yoga I occasionally read described it as a timeless discipline going back thousands of years. But recently I came across a book called Yoga Body, The Origins of Modern Posture Practice, which challenged all my assumptions to their very core. Its author is historian Dr. Mark Singleton.
What my research has shown is that so-called Swedish gymnastics in the latter half of the 19th century without a doubt influenced the way that yoga developed in certain places in India, and as a result the ways of understanding and practicing yoga changed substantially.
So very interesting that Swedish gymnastics had a role in modern yoga. And I think they're going to reference, I think I have the gentleman's name right, Niels Bukes or Bunks, something like that, Bukes. And he was a Danish gymnast and educator who founded the first athletic folk high school in Ollerup in Funen, Denmark. He achieved international fame as a gymnast trainer for the Danish team of Olympic Games in Stockholm. And he wrote this book called Primitive Gymnastics, but then translated, it became known as Primary Gymnastics. Pretty interesting. And so within the tradition of this, so this book came out 1924. So within the tradition, Buke developed his own primitive gymnastics aimed at using forceful exercises to prevent stiffness and bad bodily habits. His 1924 book, Primitive Gymnastics, or Primary, was a manual in his method. I think you can get it on Amazon, or they have like a collector's item. I looked it up. I did a podcast on this a while back featuring this gentleman, and some of the interesting things in his background. You can do the research on your own if you'd like. So his method, which was later adopted by organizations such as the YMCA, historian Mark Singleton, there you go, has argued that through the YMCA and their gymnastics training in British India, Buke's exercises influence Krishnamacharya style of asanas in modern yoga as exercise. In 1931, his gymnastic team toured the world, visiting Japan, where his system became highly influential. So let's listen to the upcoming clip here. I think this touches on that. So let's take a listen.
Primary gymnastics, the basis for rational physical development.
This is by Niels Buch, a Dane, a teacher of gymnastics, whose system was based on Ling gymnastics, an earlier form of Scandinavian gymnastics. Ling gymnastics is a kind of curative gymnastics, so not just keep fit, which quickly became the basis for military training across Europe and in Britain also, and then is exported to India as military training and also in schools. And I was struck by a significant number of body postures that resembled yoga poses and that could be named as yoga poses, such as here the downward dog, the cat pose, side bending, 20 or 30 poses that look like yoga poses but that aren't.
It's incredibly fascinating learning about the transformation and metamorphosis of yoga and how it keeps changing, and I don't know, hopefully it's all for a better cause, and it gets spread and we all find inner peace, because I think that's the true goal of it, or at least one of the major goals of it. So interestingly enough, when this more dynamic version of the physical asanas and yoga and vinyasa, I think, comes from this era, from this type of yoga that's been kind of changed, inoculated with gymnastics. Swami Vivekananda is bringing another form of yoga to the west. And here's a little clip on that. Thank you for listening. HigherMindYoga.com. Clips courtesy of BBC Sounds, Secrets, History of Yoga.
At the same time that this article comes out, we have Swami Vivekananda, who has been in America by this time already 4 years, has published the book which will form a kind of blueprint for subsequent practical do-it-yourself experiments in yoga, and has taught the first yoga class to a group of Westerners, but who, quite surprisingly, given what we think of as yoga today, has not taught any postures. He's teaching meditation, he's teaching pranayama and visualizations, omitting postures, and he says you shouldn't do it.
So very, very interesting. No Surya Namaskar, no Ashtangana B or A, or any of that stuff. The roots of yoga. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. If you haven't yet, head on over to HigherMindYoga.com. And you can become a patron and help out the podcast for as little as $1. I think at the $5, I don't even know, but I know you get a sticker one way or another if you help out and contribute to the podcast. So on this next clip here, we'll have Dr. James Mallinson, which I spoke about on the other podcast, and who is doing research with Mark Singleton, who you heard in the previous part of the podcast there, and who is also part of the Hatha Yoga Project. So we can go a little bit deeper into the roots of yoga.
The earliest analyses of yoga practice from about 2,000 years ago, the postures associated with it are seated positions. You know, the lotus position is the classic example, but there are 8 or 9 others are listed in Patanjali's Yoga Shastra from about the 4th or 5th century CE.
Very few physical poses are mentioned.
And they are firm, solid seated positions which, once mastered, you can kind of forget about your body and then just concentrate on meditation or breath control and so forth. It's not until perhaps the last 600 or 700 years that this notion of asana for physical well-being, for looking after the body, comes in. But it does, and we see a clear development in the textual tradition. From the earliest mentions in these texts from sort of 14th, 15th century, asana is said to make the body supple and thinner. Actually, it is actually specified that you will lose excess fat, but that's not really emphasized too much. Over the subsequent centuries, up to the 18th, 19th century, this becomes more and more a feature of certain new texts that are developed. And also asana becomes much more dynamic. So we get sort of squat thrusts, repeated prostrations, this kind of thing, or downward bends.
So there you have it, Dr. James Mallinson on the BBC Secret History of Yoga. I'll post a link. You should listen to the whole thing. There's a lot more information there. Those were just a few of the interesting clips that I thought were kind of outstanding. There are a few, but I want to fill up my whole podcast with clips from the BBC. But I thought I'd bring it to your attention to further edify yourself. If you're doing yoga, you might as well know where it came from, what the roots are, and how it's evolving. You know, I think the evolution of it, I think it's a good thing. But it's also good to know the foundation of it, and maybe bring some of those older, forgotten, and undiscovered techniques and different philosophies into the present. So delve in. Edify yourself. Have some fun. And don't forget to breathe. So a saying that popped up on the radar here in my little tiny world, I just think I'd talk about it. It was kind of funny. My son wanted to watch a movie. We didn't know what to watch. Get together, let's watch a family movie together. And he wanted to watch Kung Fu Panda. Let's watch Kung Fu Panda 3. I'm like, Kung Fu Panda 3? What do I really want to watch? And let's see if there's something else. And then we had to cave in because there was really nothing else to watch. So I go, all right, let's watch Kung Fu Panda. So one little nugget, and you'll probably hear this and go, maybe it'll trigger something, maybe not. I don't know. But I guess it's in keeping with the podcast and keeping with some of the spiritual teachers that I've been listening to. And what's the character's name? Wait, let's see. Oh, here. Master Shifu in Kung Fu Panda. In the movie, pretty much in the beginning, there's a controversy over the panda being this magical super warrior or whatever. And one of the sayings, for whatever reason, the wise turtle, Kung Fu Master Shifu says is, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why we call it the present, or that's why they call it the present. So I don't know, a little glimmer there. I saw it in the movie. I don't think anybody else picked up on it, whatever. And then I said it because we were like, oh, what was your favorite part of that? Because Kung Fu Panda 3 turned out to be pretty good. It was kind of funny. And cute movie. And I got a little nugget of wisdom from it, right? And so I don't know where that saying came from. So I kind of forgot about it. And my wife she said it because I brought it up, and I guess it's stuck in her mind too, whatever. And she says it out loud at work or whatever, and somebody goes, "Oh, are you a member of a certain organization, AA or what?" I'm like, because that person is. And I go, no, and it's something that is said at these meetings, which I thought it was interesting. Like you guys say, a Kung Fu Panda. I don't know. So I tried to look up where this saying came from, and I really couldn't find anything except it looks like it's accredited, something similar, but it looks like there's a few variations on it. So a lot of it is credited to Bill Keane, and I thought maybe it doesn't say anything here, but I thought maybe it's something to do with the recovery programs. But it turns out Bill Keane is a family circus. I don't know. It doesn't say any. I can't find any documentation that links them to any of the recovery programs. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just ignorant. But I don't see it. So in one of the cartoons, it says yesterday's the past, tomorrow's the future, but today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So I don't know where he got that, or because it's accredited to him. It's a quote. And then they found Emily Dickinson, a similar poem somewhere. So it's just a funny way how. I don't know. It seems so martial arts, and the way it's said in the movie in a cartoon, and then finding out that I wonder even how it made into the movie, and then someone took one and kind of made a cute one with yesterday is relative, tomorrow is speculative, but today is electric. That's why it's called current. Pretty interesting. I don't know, a little saying there that got caught in my brain. and I thought I'd share. So what is this one? Oh, yeah. So here's the Emily Dickinson poem. Yesterday is history, 'tis so far away. Yesterday is poetry, 'tis philosophy. Yesterday is mystery. But look, it's where it is today, while we shrewdly speculate, flutter both away. All right. So who knows where she got it from? Anyway, just having a little fun here with Kung Fu Panda and Higher Mind Yoga. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And if you haven't yet, start your meditation practice. If you have, great. If you haven't, just make 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes. I think I'm going to take 5 minutes right after this podcast. I think I heard the Brooklyn accent there. Yeah. Higher Mind Yoga. Until next time, be well. And I wish you inner peace. Namaste. Music courtesy of Viana.com. I will post a link. Thank you.